This is The Competitive Edge with Tucker Max. Welcome to The Competitive Edge. My name is Scott Britton, and I'm here to help you answer a question that we all have. How can I get an edge in my business and life? Each week, we're going to uncover how some of the most successful and inspiring entrepreneurs, entertainers, and thought leaders get an edge, so you too can reach your full potential. Do you want more unique ideas and tactics like the ones we're about to share in this episode? Then you're going to want to do two things. The first is to subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes so that you don't miss out on new ideas from future conversations. After this, you're going to want to go check out my main site, lifelonglearner.com. When you enter in your email address to join the Lifelong Learner community, you'll get access to my most advanced strategies to stack the deck in your favor. Again, that's life-longlearner.com. 7 years ago, I bought a book in the airport before I embarked on my first ever study abroad experience in Barcelona, Spain, that made me laugh harder than any book I've ever read. And I remember picking it up because I had heard about it from a friend, and then the title was just so fascinating. It was called I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, and it was written by today's guest on the show, Tucker Max. Aside from pure hilarity, this was such a fascinating read for me because here was a dude who's making a ton of money writing off stuff that me and my frat boy friends were often trying to accomplish and sometimes getting into ourselves. And it was just truly an incredible thing for me that this guy could make a living off of it. And today, Tucker is going to come on the show and really talk about how to become a mainstream best-selling author, whether you're talking about frat tire stories, nonfiction stuff, or even fiction stuff. And Tucker's worked with some of the most amazing people in the publishing world, from authors to publishing companies, and really just understands this business. So he's going to share in this episode what he believes to be the recipe for becoming a mainstream successful author, as well as some other people out there who are publishing books that are doing amazing things for their business. If you've ever thought, I should write a book, you're definitely going to want to take the time to listen to this conversation because Tucker is one of the brightest minds in publishing and has a proven track record to back that up. Alrighty, let's dive into this interview with Tucker Max. All right, Tucker, what is up, man?
What's going on, Scott?
Not a whole lot. I'm really excited to have you on the show today because, we've had other people that have talked about a lot of the things that you've done really successfully, like publishing, but in a different way. And I think what I would love to kind of dive into is, as somebody who's had the success that you had and how the publishing world is changing, how does somebody today think about becoming a mainstream successful author?
Yeah, that's the question I get, man, from all the people who have a little bit of success on the internet. They all want to know how to do it for real. And so here's the thing, man. Like there's a couple things. So I can talk about all the strategies and tactics and all that kind of stuff, and that conversation is beneficial. But that conversation is only going to get you so far. It's not going to get you full, like really full on. What the problem with most people who have a little bit of success on the internet is that they look at content as secondary, and they really. I'm not accusing anyone or saying like oh, they're a bunch of scammers, although some people are. The way a lot of people look at it is, how do I market this? Right? They kind of start with marketing and then they back the content out, which is, I think, a really good way to sort of, if you have nothing, to find a market, to test your material, to see if there's sort of a product market fit, things like that. That's a really good strategy. That's not good with getting big, because the way you get big is you have to do something that's either very new, very unique, or extremely valuable. And you don't learn what those three things are by test marketing what already exists. So a lot of people, it's funny, like people, I've been doing this for a long time, so people forget that I didn't, I started in the same position as everyone else, just some no-name schmo trying to make it, and I didn't really worry about market. What I worried about was can I write stuff that's really funny, that makes people laugh and that people enjoy? And I only worried about that. So to put it in sort of more like internet marketer type parlance, I only cared about content. And because I only cared about content, for the most part, I shouldn't say that. I was at least 80, 20, 90, 10 content to marketing. Like how you put stuff out matters, of course, but I'm mostly focused on, is this story really fucking funny or is it not? And is it really sharp or is it not? And because I focused on that almost to the exclusion of everything else for a long time, what I ended up doing was creating something that was amazing. And what's funny is the market didn't exist for it. You know, like I mean, the New York Times said, I don't know if I really like the name of this, but they said I invented a new literary genre. You know, like satire exists because of me. I wasn't trying to create something to fit a market. I was trying to create something great that people responded to. And that's very much a mindset. And it takes time, man. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of diligence. And a lot of people who kind of think in terms of how do I make a business, they don't think in those terms. You know what I'm saying? And so like you know who did this? And not to compare, this is apples and oranges a little bit because I'm sort of more of an entertainment content person and Google is not. But Google did the same thing. It's early on. If there's a really famous interview, I forget. I think it was with Wired, where they were asking. I think it was Larry Brin. Why don't you guys advertise? You clearly have the best search engine on the internet. Why don't you do any advertising? You know, Lycos and all these other. If you remember Lycos and InfoSeek and those companies, they were all they do it. They do advertising. And Larry said, well, because we're improving, we don't really care about getting people in the door because we know we have the best product, but we know the product can be way better. And so every day, all we do is work on making the product better because we think if you find the product next week, you're going to find a better search engine than you did this week. So we're okay if you find us next week. And that's a completely different mindset. And that's the mindset of I'm going to build something huge. And it's going to be huge because it's meaningful, not I'm going to like take an idea and then market it big. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand totally, man. And I think it makes total sense. And I guess like the takeaways here, because I have a lot of friends who are like entrepreneurs who've like sold companies and, now they're like, okay, it's time to write the book. And I don't know like if they're asking themselves the right questions.
They're not.
I can almost promise you they're not.
Because I run the publishing company that does the books for a lot of those people. I mean, figuratively. I'm not talking about specifically about your friends necessarily. But like, let me even phrase this a better way. So I spoke at a conference maybe 3 years ago. And right after me, Eben Pagan spoke, who's really big in the internet sort of direct marketing space. I mean, that guy's made hundreds of millions of dollars. He's one of the best sort of guys ever in that space selling stuff. And Tim Ferriss was interviewing. He interviewed me and Eben, and he asked me the same question he asked Eben: how much of it is content and how much is marketing? And I said it's 80% content, 20% marketing. And Eben got up and he said, like it was like an hour later, he said, I think it's 20% content and 80% marketing. And here's what's funny: I think we're both right, but it just depends what your goal is. Eben's goal is only to sell stuff to people. That's it. He doesn't care about being famous or well-known. At least he didn't at that time. He's kind of shifting now, right? And so that made sense. If your goal is, I just want to sell shit, then you should really focus on marketing and about extracting money from people and not really about the content that much because the content's secondary if your only goal is to sell stuff. My goal was to do something that was really awesome and important and cool and that would get a lot of attention. Not as much to sell as much stuff, right? So I focused on how do I create content that's amazing, right? And so both of us hit our goals. I became really famous. He became really rich. And his strategy worked for him. And my strategy worked for me. It's really hard to switch strategies, though. And I'm not sure you can do both things at the same time unless you're in a field like maybe software startups where you can do amazing things and scale really quickly into billion-dollar companies, Totally.
So, I mean, I guess the questions that, just to kind of circle back here and talk about a little bit what you talked about before, the questions that people should ask themselves, there's three things. It's like, is this incredibly unique? Is it incredibly valuable? What else do people need to really think about when they're deciding whether
is it incredibly valuable to other people?
Got it.
You know, like a lot of people, dude, a lot of people think that their shit's amazing and it's not, you know, or like, look, I've done things that I thought were like, this is the most amazing shit ever. And no one else fucking cared, you know? So it doesn't matter if it's amazing to you. It does to your life. And that's great, right? But if you only want to write stuff for your life, it's called a diary. And basically no one gives a shit about your diary unless you're Anne Frank. So like, you need to think, does it matter to other people? Do other people really care? You know?
So when you were writing your initial, I guess, diary entries or whatever you want to call them, that eventually,
No, but they weren't diary entries. That's the thing. No, this is not a small point. It's actually a really important point. So let me explain why. When I started writing, I was writing emails to my friends. These were not things for myself. My goal was I wanted to make my friends laugh. It was after we had graduated from law school. We all went to work in different cities and in different sort of law firms, and so we couldn't go out together and do fun things together. So I was bored as hell in my job. I hated it, so I just sat around and wrote emails about this stupid shit I would do at night with dumb South Florida girls. Like that was what I did, and it made my friends laugh, and that was my goal, right? And it turned out that stuff was also really funny to the rest of the world, right? Now, Scott, let's make a distinction here because this is important. I was writing entertainment content, which is not the same thing as nonfiction instructional content. It is similar. Like my stuff is nonfiction, but it's not instructional content. Like you're not supposed to read my stories and be like, oh, this is how I should talk to girls or something. If you do that, you're gonna come into some rough patches if you act like me out of context. So if you're writing instructional, informational stuff, I think you have to take a little bit of a different strategy than I did, but I think fundamentally it's not the same. Yes, you need to think, is this new or a new take? Is this valuable to other people, right? Those are really kind of the two new things. Is it novel? Is it valuable to other people? And is it easy to understand and engage with? Those are kind of the big things. Is that what I said? That's what the three things I said at the beginning.
Yeah, totally. Can you give an example of somebody who has you've recently worked with that's brought in something like new and novel to the market that people might not have thought would have worked?
James Altucher. So we did Choose Yourself, James Altucher's book, which has sold 200,000 or 300,000 copies now, which is for a self-published book is amazing. It's really good. Especially a self-published nonfiction book is kind of astounding. Hit Wall Street Journal bestseller list. It's doing really well. So here's the thing. James is, a lot of people have, for years actually, this is actually a great example because a ton of people are in the self-help space. And it's like, oh, follow your passion and start a new life and basically how many Tim Ferriss imitators have come out, right? And God knows Tim Ferriss did not invent self-help. Tim Ferriss is another great example, actually. I've helped Tim on his last two book launches. And Tim's been a friend of mine I helped him on all three because I helped him with 4 Hour Workweek a little bit too. He's been a good friend of mine for a lot of years. And so Tim's a great example. He took self-help and he gave it a new name, called it lifestyle design or life hacking. And he brought 3 or 4 distinct new ideas into them. Not world changing, not fundamentally different, but definitely new. Virtual assistants, outsourcing, sort of various things, traveling, all these sorts of ideas, combining them. He was the first one to combine all these into sort of a system and gave it a name, right? I think James Altucher did the same thing with sort of a follow your passion style advice. And his idea is sort of you need to, instead of waiting for someone to give you permission or pick you for something, you need to change your frame and you need to choose yourself for whatever it is you want to do, right? And I think Tim's stuff was a little bit, quality of information aside, Tim had 3 or 4 new ideas and a new name for a category. James just had a new way to frame a person's relationship with sort of doing something outside the norm. Both of those, I think, were very valuable and have proven so through millions, of sales. Or in James's case, hundreds of thousands now. So is that a good example?
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, how much do you think of James's success is based upon his pre-existing platform?
A lot of it, of course. But do you understand, Choose Yourself is basically just a collection of his columns what made his platform big? are all his writing, right? Choose Yourself is a collection of all that writing. Plus, it's just put into a certain frame and organized in a way that's really easy for people to understand and a really clear framework and provides a lot of very direct, actionable value to them. That's how he built his platform on Choose Yourself before it was a book.
Got it. Makes total sense. Just so I'm curious, when an author comes to you and says, hey man, I want to work with you. I think I have this great book. I had this great idea. What are the things that you're looking for that make you want to work with somebody?
Well, so, okay. I don't really, there's this idea in publishing. Again, the old school publishing is they look for books that they think will sell a lot and they give you an advance and then they do a bunch of the work and they own the book. My model is the reverse. I don't pick people. People come to me who really are in the James Altucher model. I have great content. I want to own my own book. I want to either build a business off of it or I want to do something related to the book. And so I'm going to pay you anywhere from 10 to 50 grand to fully professionally publish this book. So it looks like I went through Simon and Schuster or Random House or whatever, but I get to own everything and I control everything. So I don't look for I won't say I'll publish anyone who has money, because there have definitely been people who came to us and I'm like, no, I'm just not. But they were like either publishing really what I thought was really scammy stuff or really like one guy was, God, he wanted to do a novel about like, I don't know, like really like creepy stuff, like dealing underage children and stuff. I'm like, look, man, I don't want to be involved in this. This is really weird. But for the most part, anyone who has any sort of decent stuff at all, and they can pay for it, and generally if they can pay for it, it means they have a way to monetize the book. The book is sort of either a business card for them or a lead gen for something else, or the book is accumulation of sort of a lot of knowledge and wisdom they want to pass on or whatever. Then we'll work with pretty much anyone in that category. So for me, it's more like, are you easy to work with? Do you have money? And is this book part of a plan so that like, I don't want someone to put $40,000 on a credit card. I won't work with those. I turn those people down too. Or if they come to me with their life savings and they're like, I'm hoping this book will, be what makes me a star. I'm like, I'm not going to take your money, because then it's just like that doesn't work,
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that you brought up, that books, a lot of people look at them as like business cards or legacies. I know a little bit about this, but I think maybe people listening, can people expect to make a lot of money off books?
Yes and no. So I would say you should not expect to make a lot of money directly off the book sale. So here's the thing. You can take the same content, and if you sell it like an information product, you can charge a lot more. You have to be kind of like, I don't want to say deceptive practices, but you have to use direct marketing practices, which tend to be a little bit manipulative and deceptive. And you can charge $45 for an ebook or $99 for an ebook, and it's usually not that great of information. It's shit you can find in lots of other books. But you're never going to be mainstream. You're never going to be reputable, at least outside of direct marketing circles. That's just the reality. And that could change over time. I don't really ever see that changing, though, because if you're charging $90 for a PDF, no one in media is going to take you seriously, nor should they. Now, if you put your book on Amazon, it's not right or wrong, fair or unfair. This is just the reality. If you put your book on Amazon, same material, you put it as a book and do it professionally and make it look like a really good book, then people will look at you differently, because a book as a social object has a different cultural significance. Again, not right or wrong. This is just the reality of sort of how it is, right? And so you can do a lot of press, a lot of interviews, assuming the material is good in your book and that it's interesting to other people, not just interesting to you, but it's actually interesting to other people, or it's novel, or it's a new idea or a new combination of ideas. That's how you become mainstream, is by having that book, right? So now, to answer your question, can people make money off of that book? James has made decent money. He's made, I'm not sure what he sells online for, probably a few dollars. So he's probably made whatever, let's call it $300,000 to $500,000 off of his book, but he sold, let's say 200,000 copies. So, and again, my numbers could be a little bit off. He could have made a little bit more, depending on various factors. But that's good money, right? But James has probably made a lot more money based on the exposure that he's gotten from Choose Yourself. So he's a big time. He loves startup investing. I know he's gotten into a lot of deals because people read Choose Yourself and then they brought their companies to him to invest in or ask for advice. He's gotten a lot more media exposure because of that book. I know he was on TechCrunch and he was on a couple other places. His columns were before the book. After Choose Yourself, he's now in at least 3 times the media outlets, his materials being published, right? So he's seen as a lot more credible, even though he had like 6 books, and some of them were published by mainstream media, or mainstream publishers. They weren't very good books and they weren't done well. This book was really good. It was done very well. And so what he's done and what a lot of people are starting to do, which I think is very smart, is they're using books as ways to make more money in other ways. So, for example, you can use a book speaking gigs where you can make 5 to 20 grand on a speaking gig, right? You can use books to do consulting. You know, if you have the definitive book about podcast marketing and you're on Clarity at $5 an hour, I might call you and I might say, hey, dude, let's talk for 30 minutes. Tell me how to make my podcast bigger, right? If you are, consulting, you can use it as really, even if let's say you're an executive at a company, right? You're not selling anything directly, but you want to maybe move up to a bigger executive role in another company. Your book can become sort of a business card for you. You publish a book and it gets 1 or 2 decent reviews somewhere or comments or whatever. It gets a little bit of press. And here's the thing. Let's say you are, in some like really specific field, like, I don't know, telecommunications, some sort of like you buy dark fiber or something like that. Like that's a really specific field. And let's say there's 10,000 people in America who care. If you write a book in that field, those 10,000 people will probably hear about it and read it. All of a sudden, you go from one of the 10,000 to the guy in that 10,000 who wrote the book on it. Now, even if you're super qualified or not, now a lot of people are going to come to you for advice, or maybe you get a job with Google because they want to buy more dark fiber or something like that, right? So you've now got a signifier, an indicator of status, or like an accreditation or some sort of certified thing that makes you look way, way better and more important than other people, whether it's true or not. And it should be if you're writing a book, but some people write books, they don't really know what they're talking about, which is fine. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. But so you can use books to get ahead in your career, to sell consulting. If you have a business, that's actually the vast majority of books that I do now through Lioncrest are people who have really decent businesses and they want to get more exposure for their business. So, for example, this one girl, she is a retail, sort of like a consultant for these retail companies that do, what are the ones where they use like iPads to size you and then like they send the clothes to your house or something like that?
Yeah, okay. Got it.
It's a really new thing. And she's one of the only, she became an expert at it really quick. Is one of the only ones who does it. She wrote the first book on this. And like, I mean, it's only 15,000 words, but she's only sold 5,000 copies, but off of this book, she's gotten, she has more consulting gigs than she can do now. And these are like major 6- and 7-figure consulting gigs. And she has major corporations coming to her now, to help them set up these sort of new retail models. Right. And so she basically, in fact, I think that she paid us more to make the book and to market the book than she made directly on the book. I think the book about covered her costs, but she's probably made, I don't know, it's hard for me to estimate, somewhere in the mid 6 figures to low 7 figures already. And this is basically established her as the person to go to in her field. So it gives her authority and credibility. Does all this make sense?
Yeah, no, this is really great stuff. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are probably listening that have never even thought about writing a book because, they haven't cured cancer or something, that actually could provide a ton of value to their industry and themselves by kind of putting together like some really good niche information.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Zach and I developed this program. So Zach is my partner in the publishing company. He's a partner now. He was my employee, and he did such a good job. I gave him a piece, and we kind of developed this program together. We call it Book in a Box, right? And so the idea is that if you are a person who has an idea of something, like something that other people don't know that they would pay to know, right? And you want to write a book. Most people, like you nailed it, Scott. You said they think like you have to cure cancer, you have to have some amazing big idea, or you have to be the Dalai Lama to write a book, or even that like, you know, your book has to be this 100,000 words and you have to sit there for a year in a cave and write it, and all, that's all bullshit. So we kind of set up this program where people don't even have to write. What we do is we'll get on the phone with them and we will talk to them for maybe an hour or two and figure out, okay, what do you have to say? Like, what do you have to say that matters? So there's a guy, I think, coming through the program now who's a plumber. And he is really good at helping people understand how to talk to plumber. Like when you hire a plumber at your house, either a plumbing contractor or like, let's say your plumbing's broken or anything more than like a small plumbing job, he helps people understand like how to deal with plumbers, right? And so he wants to write a book about this. Like, how to talk to your plumber so you don't get screwed or something. And because he wrote some blog posts and it did amazing, and now he wants to do a book, which is great because he has a plumbing consulting business. And so he can't. I mean, the guy's dyslexic. He literally can't write anything. And by the way, dyslexic people are not stupid at all. It's just the way the brain works. Writing is just weird. So we sat with him for an hour or 2 hours. And we outlined everything he has to say, and it's basically about 15 to 20,000 words, which is perfect for an ebook, right? So Zach came up with a really good outline, and then what we did is over 3 sessions, 3-hour-long different sessions, we asked him a ton of questions for each, the sort of 3 sections of the book, right? And it was like an interview, and he answered all the questions, and so it got to be about a 10,000 word, 15,000 word transcript. We had all that transcribed by, you know, speech pad or a virtual assistant or something, and then sent that to an editor we work with. And you know, the spoken word is very different than the written word. So the editor took his exact spoken words, converted those to sort of really good, clear written text, and ended up with about a 15,000 word ebook that was awesome. Like I'm thinking about building a house maybe on some land that I might buy. And I'm going to use this guy's book to understand exactly what to look for in a plumbing contractor and how to talk to them. It's really fucking amazing. And he'll probably sell 5,000 copies of this book a year for the next 10 years. But more importantly, everyone now who wants a plumbing contracting consultant is going to talk to this guy. He paid us, I don't know, 10 grand. We didn't do any marketing for this book. He didn't want any marketing. He didn't need it. He just needed a piece of something he could sell to make passive income on, and a piece of social proof to show he was the authority, right? And so the book, when it comes out, it's not out yet. It's otherwise I would pitch it and help him. It's not out yet, but it's really professional. If you were to look at it, it doesn't look like a self-published book. It looks like, oh wow, Random House must be getting into niche books. No. This guy paid us about 10 grand, and we helped him write a book. And cover is amazing. You know, we did the sort of the author, the about the author, the book description copy. It's on Amazon. It's going to be on iTunes. It looks amazing. Looks professional. I think he actually may have paid us a little bit addition and also to set up a landing page, or he may have had someone do that on their own. I can't remember. But for around 10, maybe 15 grand, he got this amazing lead gen that's probably going to develop anywhere from 6 or 7 figures of income for him over the next 10 years, and very little of it will actually be from the book sale. Most of it's going to be from consulting. We call this book in a box. So anyone who kind of wants to have a book, they have good ideas, they have things to say to people, and they want a book, but they don't want to go through the self-publishing process or go out to publishers for anywhere from 6 to 10 or 15 grand, depending. We do the whole thing with them, but it's their words, their ideas, their book. They own all the royalties. We don't. It's all yours. You know what I'm saying?
That's great, man.
By the way, Zach, or Scott, I'm sorry. This process I just described, if you don't have 5 or 10 grand, you can do this on your own. Like, I'm not trying to act like we have some magic sauce that no one can replicate. It's going to take you time and expertise, and it's going to be much harder if you do it on your own. But if you have a lot of time and not much money, do this on your own, you know?
Yeah, man. You know, it's funny. I actually did a book this way. I did a book on Ivy League football recruiting right when I graduated college, and it was just...
Did you for real? Where'd you play?
I played at Princeton, man.
Oh, nice.
So, I got connected to this company, Hyper Inc. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, they make t-shirts and shit, right?
No, they actually help people create books, and take and market and sell. It's called Hyper Inc. Press. You can check it out.
Okay.
But yeah, dude, we did like a 4-hour video interview, and then a team of writers, like basically wrote the book, created all the marketing material, packaged it, put it on a little website. And if you go to Amazon or even Google maybe, and you search Ivy League football recruiting, this book that I wrote when I was 21 appears. And it's kind of I think the big thing here though, and this might be useful to people, is like, I'm not really leveraging that because I have no back end. Like there's no like Ivy League football recruiting consulting or whatever. So I make like $8 a month off of it.
Hold on a minute. This is cracking me up. The book is called The Best Book on Ivy League Football Recruiting.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, dude. It's totally like SEO, like all that stuff. But
yeah, and it looks like it. This is the worst cover I've did you make this cover?
No, they made it.
Yeah, it looks like they had like this is bad. There's a picture of like a football trophy like thing. Like right next to like a rubber stamp that says A+, and then it's like it seriously looks like someone that went into Microsoft Word and typed out the best book on Ivy League football recruiting in this awful font, and then put it together. Who's Andrea Tsai, the editor?
Yeah, she's the person who edited it with me.
Yeah, see, the way we do it, it's only one person. You are the author, and that's it. There's nothing else.
Yeah, but I think it's like a valuable lesson, and we talked a little bit about this at dinner in Austin in terms of like how you can leverage like different content mediums across platforms. So like you mentioned, starting with video. And when you start with video, you can then create audio content, and then you can create written content from that. And I think a lot of people, like you alluded to, are like, dude, I can't write. I can't do a book.
Yes. Well, so that's a little bit of a different discussion. So I started a new project with Jeffrey Miller, who's a famous research scientist who wrote The Mating Mind, which is like one of the big revolutionary books in EvPsych that kind of explained that intelligence is sort of like, he thinks intelligence is sort of how, or sexual selection over intelligence is how humans developed intelligence, whatever. It doesn't really matter for the point of this podcast. But the point is, we're doing sort of a book that's coming out next year on sex and dating advice for young guys. And we're trying to be the first like reputable scientific sort of advice that a guy can like be proud of taking and that actually works and isn't a bunch of pickup artist bullshit. And one of the things that we're doing is we are not just publishing a book. We're also doing almost everything we do is in audio, video, and print form. So the first thing we're doing now, we've already launched the podcast. It's just called the Mating Grounds Podcast, which this probably doesn't matter to most of your readers. But if you're a young guy and you care about this stuff, you can go look it up. It's fine. We've got maybe 15 episodes out. But if you look, that's just on iTunes. If you look on our page on thematinggrounds.com, which is the website, we have a page for each podcast. And then on each page, we have like the takeaways. We link, all the things we talk about in the podcast. We have a transcript of the podcast. We have video, which is not up yet, but we're going to have a YouTube channel. So every podcast is going to have audio, video, and written content because people learn in different ways. And I think the future, and this is going to take a while to get here, but I really think the future in either entertainment or information is reaching people in the medium they learn best in, not forcing them into the medium that you want to communicate in.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So there's a subsection of people that learn the best through books, other people through video, other people through listening to programs like this.
Right, exactly. How much did Hyperrank charge you, or was it like a split deal?
It was a royalty split. So basically, they took 75% of all profits.
Oh, that's bullshit.
And I just got it 25%.
Model. Yeah, that's a shitty model. And then I'm looking at their books now. They don't look very good. They're kind of, this is Brad Feld's company. I see what. Oh yeah. I mean, look, this is okay. I don't know. I mean, look, there's room in this world for lots of different models. I don't think this model makes a lot of sense for a lot of guys, because this is really just a sort of an iteration of the old model where companies own all the IP. That's never made sense to me, man. If you're trying to run a business, you're trying to build something on your own, you want to own your own IP. And so, like the reason you want to come with us is because you want to control not just the message, but you want to make sure it's super professional and you sort of own everything because you have a business or a service that collects all the benefit from this. Whereas the way Hyperrank does it, it's about them and not about you, which is fine. I guess if you're young and starting off, this might be a cool way to get one of your first things out there. Like I can see that. Or if you don't really care, you just want something out there or whatever. There's, like I said, there's different models for different people can work.
Totally, man. And I think it's just an interesting concept about that I'd like to explore a little bit more with you in terms of like how you can just leverage this for yourself. And I think a couple of people are doing some really interesting stuff outside of just like the whole like public speaking consulting stuff, where they're like getting into startup investing, kind of like you. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about, you know, how you've been able to leverage what you've done to create some of your companies, some of the investment deals that you've done. Because I think that, like, that's very, very interesting to me.
Right. Okay. So basically, what I actually have a piece written. It's going to come out on my news site, tuckermax.me, which is like not the writing about the drinking, hooking up I used to do. It's a different site. But so I'll kind of give you a preview of what I wrote in that post, what I talked about. To me, startup investing and advising is, I don't want to say a hobby, but sort of something I do in my spare time. And because here's the thing. So I developed obviously a set of skills, not just, it's funny. People are like, oh, some people who don't really understand, they're like, oh, you just got drunk and hooked up with girls. Anyone can do that. And I'm like, you're right. A lot of people do that, but none of them are millionaires because of it. So you might want to think about what I did differently. And then they kind of look at me like, oh yeah, right. Like I didn't think of that. And so not only did I learn how to write all these stories up, that, you know, everyone's been doing what I've done for a millennia. I just wrote them up in a funny way. And then also I learned the book business and I learned marketing, because I was doing this in 2001, 2002 is when I first put my site up, 2001 or 2002, I guess. Long before Facebook or MySpace or fucking any of this shit existed, right? Before the iPod, like all that shit. And so I've been doing this for a very, very long time. And I got very good at the book business. I got good at the movie business. I got good at marketing. I got good at all this stuff. And so what happens is a lot of guys, especially that grew up reading, actually, and women, grew up reading my stuff, they're now starting companies. And so they'll like come to me and say, hey, like, I used to love your books, blah, blah, blah. Do you have any ideas? Like, I'm, marketing help, whatever. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, it's funny. Like, I do a lot of startup investing now or advising. If you want to give me, a point, 2 points of equity, I'll be happy to, do an hour a week on the phone with you guys, whatever. And then we'll do one call and they're like, oh yeah, you have so many great ideas. This is fantastic. So I kind of started that way, basically, is helping people who already knew who I was and came to me. And then those people talked to other people. And then I got to know big investors in Silicon Valley. And now, I'm friends with everyone from Kamal Ravikant to, all the way down the list, right? He's the guy who started AngelList. And so I have a certain skill set that a lot of startup companies look for. And I can help them understand a lot of things. Because basically, now that technology and software are becoming commodified, everyone is realizing that they have to be a marketing company, a psychology company, and none of these fucking autistic nerds know how to do that. So they have to find people like me and actually people like you who kind of know how to think and know how to deal with people. And so I just kind of proved my worth with a couple companies, and then they talk, and it becomes one of those things where it's like you're an expert because you've provided enough value to enough people that they call you an expert. And that's how you become an expert, Like, you can hack that system and be full of shit, or you can just do a really good job, and then you don't have to really do anything because people tell other people. There's such a demand for expertise, marketing, social engineering, conversion tactics, all that kind of stuff. It's a Wild West, and no one really understands what they're doing, or very few people do. So if you understand it even decently and you can help companies actually move the needle, they will come to you in a lot of times, but you have to show it a few times though,
Totally, man. Yeah, I think it's awesome that you kind of just have this like other channel, and I'm sure it's even helping you further develop your expertise in other industries.
Absolutely. I'll learn something from one company, and then I'll apply it to a different company that had never thought about it. And they'll be like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, I'm helping this one pet products company. And if you look at pet products, that space, the way that they're sold online is a fucking joke. And so I basically brought in just basic best practices from sort of company, like fields, like, e-commerce fields that are very advanced and do great stuff. Not even like the really advanced SEO stuff, just basic best practices. And this company is crushing now. They've doubled revenue in 6 months. and they think I walk on water, and I'm like, no, guys, I just read Neil Patel. Like, you know, like,
Yeah.
and granted, I told them other things. There was a lot of other things I helped them with. It wasn't just sort of reading a blog and regurgitating it. But I also brought in addition other things. Like, I was like, in fact, I showed them. I'm like, they had real problems with just basic SEO. I showed them Neil Patel's stuff, and I'm like, why don't you just read this blog? And they were like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I know it seems obvious, but there's so much information out there that if you can be someone who has a decent understanding of a bunch of it, you can help a lot of people.
What's your opinion on really like doubling down on an industry or expertise versus being more of a capable generalist?
I think you need to start by doubling down on an industry and then expand from there. In fact, that applies to everything in life. That's a really good question, Scott, and especially if you're young. My guess is a lot of your listeners are young people who are trying to find their way. If you are a young person, you're trying to sort of like carve your niche. You need to become a world-class expert at something very specific. Okay? That's the quickest, easiest, best way to become big is to start really small. So for instance, let's say, like, here's a good example. If you become the world's expert at hacking iTunes podcast algorithm, do you know how much business you'd have overnight? But I can't think of, there's probably someone who's good at this, right? So like, I just tried to pick up a random example out of my head. But even if like you can go even closer, if you're the expert on hacking SoundCloud's algorithm, right? Or you just really, really know how to market podcasts, how to launch podcasts, right? So you have 5 things you do and you're just the best at them. And you're always best practices with launching podcasts, right? So then what happens is, so let's say your listener is someone who like I would never talk to because why do I give a shit? They don't have anything to offer. I just launched a podcast though. Let's say one of your listeners becomes the world expert on marketing podcasts, right? I'm going to want to talk to that person and I'm going to want to interact with them because they have information I don't have that's very specific and very difficult to replicate and very sort of niche, right? Now I'm in that niche. Now, once I get to know this person and they're the podcast expert, right? Like the launch podcast expert. So now everyone I know who's launching podcasts, I'm going to say, hey, you need to talk to the podcast person I worked with before. And then that person becomes my friend. And then I can connect them to the rest of my social network if I think that they have something to offer. And then from there, they can go from, let's say, podcast launching to full podcast marketing, right? And from there, they can maybe develop, they can become the podcast person. You know, it's sort of like the way I became good at books. I started with my own books and I learned the publishing industry because there was nothing in there teaching me, so I had to learn it. And now I'm making more money like in publishing than I did in writing in some cases. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
But I started really small with my own shit, and then I realized, wow, what I know, a lot of people will pay money for.
Yeah, it makes total sense, man. I think it's great advice. And I guess, like, you know, sometimes I think there's a fear of people starting too small. They're like, oh, like podcast launch expert. Okay. Like, what's that going to do for me? But I like how you kind of brought up the point about how you can really like expand that one particular niche skill. And once you have just the credibility in this one specific thing with some amazing people. Tucker, you've come on here and talked about so many awesome things, from launching books, becoming a mainstream author, to really how anybody should think about whether it makes sense to launch a book and ultimately leverage the credibility that comes with that. I know that you have a ton of great information out there and a ton of different projects going on. Where's the best place for people to find you online and find all this new stuff that you got going?
So if you want to just follow me personally, which, you know, me personally, at this point, I'm not that interesting, but you can go to tuckermax.me. If you want to look at sort of the publishing stuff, the best thing to do is look at either lioncrest.com or the bookinabox.co. That's sort of the project I was talking about that a lot of people have been really interested in, that we're doing even better than I thought. Like I didn't realize the demand for that was going to be so big. And then the sex and dating thing is called The Mating Grounds. So just go to thematinggrounds.com or go on a podcast and just look it up. It'll be there.
Yeah, awesome. And I also want to give you props on your testosterone guide that you published there. It's actually something where I changed a lot of my habits and different things I was doing and got tested multiple times. And It works, dude.
I know. I tested it on myself. That's the funny thing is like it actually works, and it kind of sucks because there's nothing really for me to sell through it. I mean, I guess I could come out with a line of bullshit or whatever, but like I don't really have a huge reason to promote the shit out of it because I don't make that much money on it. It's one of those weird things where it's like, oh, it really works well. You should just use it, like do what I say, but I don't make that much money on it. You know what I'm saying? It's fucked up, man. I wish I had more of an incentive to promote that thing, but it's like all the people who really promote their shit is because they make a bunch of money on some ridiculous course upsell or some bullshit line of products. And so they're willing to spend $100,000 a year on marketing for a shit product. Whereas I'm not willing to spend a bunch for marketing on a really good thing. I know. I don't know really how to get around that.
Well, you've definitely created some good favor with me, and I'm sure many other people who read the book realized that they were under optimized when it came to their hormones, and they could just change a few things in how they approach their days to ultimately get that fixed.
Dude, I'm glad it could help you, man. That's awesome. That's the point of it.
Yeah, man. Well, dude, I'm just excited to keep following you, keep checking out what you're doing. I highly recommend everybody go check that out, as well as Bookstrapper, which is a book that I read, which I thought was really good about marketing your book.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, I just appreciate you coming on the show.
My pleasure, man. Anytime. Talk to you later, brother.
Before we finish up with today's Mindshare, I just want to say thanks for listening to another episode of The Competitive Edge. If you enjoyed the ideas in this episode and want access to future conversations, the best thing you can do is subscribe to The Competitive Edge on iTunes. If you haven't done that already, right now is the best time to take care of that and get on board. And while you're there, if you feel like this show has made a positive impact on your day, it'd be great if you could leave us an iTunes review so that more people can find the show. Now, I know we covered a lot in this episode, and there might be a few key ideas or tools that you want to remember. So we went ahead and compiled all of the notes and links mentioned from this conversation for you on lifelonglearner.com. That's life-longlearner.com. Alrighty, let's go ahead and dive into today's Mindshare. Alrighty, welcome to another Mindshare segment. And today I thought I'd talk a little bit about an interesting thing that I noticed with my buddy Zach, who Tucker actually mentioned. Zach O'Brien is a friend of mine, a listener of this podcast. What's up, man? Bet you didn't know you were going to be on here. And I think he's got a really cool story and something interesting we can learn from. So Zach is now a partner with Tucker in one of his businesses, and he originally started working with Tucker. And how he got on Tucker's radar, I think, can kind of paint an interesting archetype for how you can connect with people. So Tucker is famous for some of his frat tire books, but he actually, outside of that, separate from that, he has his personal blog, tuckermax.me. And a lot of people didn't know that Tucker had this blog, but he kept writing on it. It was clearly important for him. It was important for the new direction that he was going. And it was just way less crowded of an environment where people were trying to interact with Tucker than maybe on Twitter, maybe on all of the, I hope they serve Beer in Hell series websites. And this is where Zach first connected with Tucker. And he noticed that here's an outlet, a media outlet, where he was creating content that was really important to him, that less people were trying to communicate with him on, and might be an actually easier place to engage with him. So he did start engaging with him on that platform, and that turned into an email dialogue, and that eventually turned into Zach working with Tucker. But I think the takeaway here is, like, when you're trying to connect with busy people, sometimes the best place to do that is where it's easier for you to be a signal to noise. And on these different channels where less people are interacting with them, but where the person that you're trying to connect with clearly demonstrates that it's important to them on that specific channel. So, another example would be if, let's say, somebody was on Instagram and they're posting on Instagram all the time, and you follow them on Instagram and they have this massive blog and massive email list, but nobody's really commenting on their photos on Instagram. This would be an example of an excellent place where it might be a good a good place to start interacting with somebody and commenting and being helpful and all the things that it takes to ultimately ingratiate yourself with somebody. But this type of mindset, I think, can be really, really helpful for a lot of young people and people trying to connect with hard to reach people, because, if you put yourself where every other person is trying to reach this person, it's going to be much, much harder to stand out. But if you go somewhere else where they clearly have interest, whatever platform this is clearly important to that person, that might be a great place to ultimately start the fire seeds of a relationship. So if somebody's out there you're trying to connect with, go check them out in all the other places that people probably aren't looking. That might be just the perfect place to start building a relationship with that person. All right. Thanks again for listening today. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Tucker Max.